Hello there, guys. Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. I'm Daniel Charles, and listen, we've had the end of the season. We've had the winning it all in row claw, and just when I think we're gonna have a relaxing time, we can sort of sit back, relax, and digest the season. No, Chelsea straight into business with the transfer window, and Liam Delap, a player who we've been linked to pretty much all season. When it looked like he may be going up to Manchester instead, it looks like he's coming to West London at Stamford Bridge. And I'm very glad to say, to his credit, on short notice, we've got an Ipswich Town expert. And also, it's going to be relevant to another part of our conversation, a Championship expert as well in Benjamin Bloom. He's a great content creator, got his own channel covering the Championship, and as well part of the Blue Monday podcast covering Ipswich. So thank you so much, Ben, for joining me. How you doing, mate?
Looking forward to it, buddy. I'm well versed in talking about Liam Delap this week. Put it that way.
Yeah. I bet you're probably heavily in demand. I assume regarding this transfer. The first thing to say, I mean, it's when Ipswich signed Delap, and obviously they've put in this release clause, which in current Premier League standards is kind of comically low given the way prices have inflated. I'm sure few predicted that it would have been seen as like this massive chase and race between big clubs only like 9 months later.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because a few people have tried to kind of poke fun at the amount of the release clause, but when you actually look at what's happening here, I think you have to say fair play to Delap's agents, because we know he was literally at Southampton before, and that clause could have been the difference between getting him and not getting him. Look, if one of the 17 had signed that deal with a £30 million release clause, I think everyone would have been saying, what are you doing? That's too low. But you have to remember that Ipswich, they're not just a promoted team. They're not a promoted team who did it without parachute payments. They're a League One Championship. So you have to kind of look at it for what it is. And yes, I can see that people will say happy days, low fee for a player of that age. But in terms of getting him in the door at Ipswich, it was what needed to be done. Yeah. There are a lot of people in for him, as I say, who probably didn't see to that demand. And sometimes, I know agents get a bad rap. You'd have to say Liam Delap's agents have done a really good job here. And, a bit of a clanging comparison with Haaland, but this idea that you can move somebody into a club where they're probably going to move on, put the right fee in the clause, and you basically just have a bidding war, don't you? So, no, it's all good. It's all good from my point of view, and I think those people who are pointing fun at it probably don't have much of an understanding of what goes on, not even below the Premier League, but below the 17, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of things online, right? It completely avoids and misses the context of, the clubs you're talking about. Like, if Chelsea did that with a signing, it would make little sense, right? But that we're not talking about Chelsea.
And look at the leverage Chelsea would have in that deal. They'd be like, we're Chelsea, we're not giving you a 30 million release clause, whereas this is Ipswich, not Chelsea, yeah?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's a relevant point to start the conversation, because obviously there's a lot of chatter amongst Chelsea fans, even some who admire Delap and see the positive attributes of him, of like this, you're going from a level of club who've just been relegated to a club that are now chasing Champions League football. There's kind of a desperation within Chelsea fans for kind of a ready-made striker. But I mean, 12 goals from 37 appearances in the Premier League. I mean, to me, when you have to add in context of who he's been playing for. To me, it feels a little bit like snobbery, if I'm being honest. And, for the price you're getting for someone who's scored over 10 Premier League goals in this current market, I mean, that's just on the face of it, that doesn't seem like a ludicrous deal to me.
Well, football fans and snobbery certainly will go together, doesn't it? Not accusing the Chelsea fans specifically, but yeah, I understand. I mean, there's a couple of things I would say. If you're a Champions League club, and I feel bad even saying it, what is 30 million quid? Do you know what I mean? It's a deal that you can do. I'm sure you'll know more about the contract than me, but I'm sure it'll be a long contract that can work down on the balance sheet, kind of gently. There'll be plenty of resale value if it doesn't work out. So for a club the size of Chelsea, it's probably a bit of a no-brainer. And what I would say is, don't just look at the team Liam Delap scored those goals for. Look at the type of goals they were as well, because there's a few of them where it's like, I mean, particularly the one against Fulham earlier in the season, one against Villa as well, where he's doing it on his own as well. And you can make the argument, put him with Sancho, Dewsbury Hall, Madueke, put him with better players, he'll get even better chances than that. I know there's a flip side to that argument with him being raw, which I'm sure we'll get onto. And I don't want to upset Chelsea fans, but Liam Delap came through at Man City, which is a level above Chelsea. So, you know, that's where he's kind of come through. I'm sure you and everybody who's really been watching have known about Liam Delap for years and years because of these ridiculous numbers in representative teams. But I get it. A lot of that was him just, you know, being able to just run all over people who were smaller than him, basically. But, you know, it's taken a couple of years, and Stoke and Preston and Hull and now Ipswich, and now he's kind of where we think he is. So, yeah, be wary of snobbery is all I'd say. This guy can play.
No, 100%. And I think, you know, Chelsea fans got a first-hand account of that in the game at Portman Road at the end of last year. Like there was still, like, right up to before we got the Champions League, many people were still looking back at that first penalty and getting angry about it because it shouldn't have been a penalty. But you look at the whole game, and especially the second goal, the Hutchinson goal, the just watching back that game when I was doing a piece for my Substack a few weeks ago, and you just see the influence, the all-round kind of influence he has of unsettling defenders, leading by the front. I mean, in sort of summary, I mean, for what, yeah, in the end was a very disappointing season, I'm sure, from an Ipswich point of view. But, you know, there must have been some joy of having that player and seeing what he was capable of doing throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely layered. If you throw in the context of where we've been as a club for 20 years, you know, we broke the transfer record. Transfer record was like 5 million quid, which was maybe even 4 million actually, which was set last summer in the Premier League in 2002, and it hadn't been broken. And obviously we broke it 5 times or something in the summer. So the idea that we were even able to sign a player for 18, 20 million quid was fantastic. And then the penny dropped for us pretty quickly in the winter that, look, this guy's going to be with us for one season, isn't it? We get it. You know, he's English, he's young, he's scoring these silly individual type goals. So yeah, you can argue without Liam Delap, would Ipswich have been where Southampton were? You know, in respects of having that player who, if you're not in a game, you ping it in the channel and let him do his work. And Chelsea fans will know better than most, because probably the greatest example of a physical monster striker in the Premier League era is Drogba, isn't it? So Liam Delap needs to go a long way to put his game together to reach that level, but you know what that type of player can do with the right circumstances and coaching and situation.
Well, I also know there's a certain other striker people have been comparing him to that wore the same number as him at Chelsea in Diego Costa. So there's there is, in terms of that kind of physical kind of confrontational number 9. There is a lot to like about him, but I mean, he's still a very raw striker, a very young striker, and I guess again from a Chelsea point of view, there's comparisons to what we have with Nicholas Jackson. You know, a young guy who I'm quite positive on, given the pressure that's placed on being a striker. But you know, he's nowhere near the finished article. Is there? You know, but when you've watched him over the course of the season, and I guess, you know, it's a good stress test because he's had to play without the ball for long periods. Are there raw things about his game, even from your perspective of like, these are the things that you can see he kind of still needs to work on as a player?
Oh, massively. But that's probably a good thing, isn't it? If it's glaringly obvious that this guy's... I think somebody tweeted yesterday, you know, the like who scored breakdown of strengths and weaknesses. And it like said, strengths, dribbling. weaknesses like everything else. So he's clearly raw, but the way people kind of use that is, it's raw, but it's, there's plenty of potential otherwise. I mean, it's become a bit of a running joke now, his propensity to not get booked in a game. Just always goes and sticks one on the centre half and gets a yellow card literally every single game. But it's about developing the player at the high level, isn't it? And I've studied the Championship for years, and we saw him go into Stoke and Preston and Hull beforehand and expected just absolute fireworks in the Championship. A Chelsea striker was when Tammy Abraham went in at Villa, and it's just like, bosh, just there's 25 goals just straight away. And that just did not happen. So, look, he's clearly a player that needs to be coached. But the other thing I would say to you is, in the 4-2-3-1 era, since this all links back to Chelsea, doesn't it? Since Mr. Mourinho made Arjen Robben and Damien Duff the main kind of goal scorers in his team, all the number 9s kind of dwindled away. And all I would say to Chelsea fans is, complete striker, Champions League level, who's going to score you plenty of goals every season. Who is he, and how much is he going to cost you? Off the forecourt. That player doesn't exist, so maybe you just have to develop them.
Well, and as well, like there is seemingly a strategy from Chelsea of they're going to sign more than one striker this summer. So maybe it's about, also sharing around the goals, because there's so much football to be played nowadays as well. Like that was another thing that people were like, well, would Delap come here as a rotational option? It's like the amount of football, the football's never ending nowadays. So it's like you don't know who's going to get injured. So I think there will be enough minutes out there, especially if he's not the only striker that comes in, which I guess for him as a youngster, I think is a lot better than kind of the 60-70 million Rasmus Højlund situation of, you are now the number 9, you are the guy. And it's stupid that, as you said earlier, the money side of it, it's for a lot of these clubs, like 30 to 60 million isn't like the biggest jump in the world. But from a media kind of outside pressure point of view, it still is. Like if you're paying, I still think over 50 million is seen as quite big, even by today's standards.
Well, it's just a narrative around Chelsea as well. Any player, whatever the fee, who goes in there is, and unless they're absolutely fantastic, then they're a bust and a waste of money. I mean, I've had this conversation with a few people, and I just think it's a bit of a non-starter with elite sportsmen. Their mentality is never, oh well, I'm not going to go to Chelsea because I might not start every game. Their mentality is, mate, I'm going to Chelsea and I'm backing myself, and I'll make that shirt mine. That's how these people are trained from like the age of 10 or whatever. The messaging going into their heads every day that you back yourself and you go and do it. And I'll reiterate, Liam Delap has come through at Manchester City, where, and he was the main man for a lot of that. And okay, we've seen players at Manchester City drop into the team, and that hasn't happened for Liam Delap. But there's often a bit of a lag, and people peak at different ages. So yeah, we shall see how it turns out. Look, it's not going to be the worst situation in the world to have this rampaging, physical monster coming into a game at 65, 70 minutes. And I was going to ask you, actually, because covering Maresca in the Championship, I always felt he never got what he wanted from Iheanacho or Cannon. Ended up using Vardy at Leicester and got all his goals from Dewsbury Hall and Fatawu and Mavididi. What does Maresca want from a 9?
I think there is a frustration similar at Chelsea because we have, to great frustration, crossed the ball a lot this season, and because it's that whole thing of he wants the wingers to kind of be very natural wingers, and you're using your centre forward who can of course drop deep and be in build up, which I actually think is something Jackson does quite well, but as kind of a focal point, as a physical number 9, Jackson aerially has never been that good, and it's still kind of a massive weakness in his game. And I think that even as far back as last summer when we were linked to the likes of John Duran and Samuel Marodian, a deal that, you know, in another reality could have very easily gone through. I think he wants a more, as I say, more, yeah, it's very cliched and a little bit disrespectful, but more of a battering ram, more of a focal point. I think he does see the 9 as someone that is who players work off of rather than kind of your all action, dropping deep, fluidly interchanging with everyone. I that's my impression, and the impression we get is that Maresca has really pushed this Delap deal because obviously the experience he had with him when he was in Man City's academy, and a player
I forgot about that. Yeah.
So there's clearly a previous link there. I mean, I sort of make a joke of it, but, you know, Chelsea, it does feel like Chelsea's recruitment policy nowadays is kind of basically Brighton, Man City, or you've played in Manchester or well, you've worked in Manchester somehow, because obviously we've got Joe Shields in our recruitment team who was at Man City before. So I think that's what Maresca wants. And you know, just looking at Delap, although he's had to play a more counter-attacking game, I think you're right to point out that when you look at the variety of his goals, which I always think is a great sign in a striker, like there isn't just like it's not a Timo Werner, the ball gets played over a high line and he just runs through one-on-one, which very rarely ever happens in the Premier League for Chelsea, especially. I think that's what he wants. Just my impression, and also the number of times we've, as a means to break down a low block. You may have seen it when Chelsea played Ipswich a couple of weeks ago. It's a real big struggle because Jackson isn't doing that, and then when he's tried, even a youngster like Tyreek George, bless him, is not going to do that role. Nkunku's not going to do that role. So I think that's what he sees as a number 9, and probably in kind of another striker, I think, whether it's, you know, Ekatike, or maybe they go even bigger than that and go for a Gyökeres or Osimhen. I think they're looking for more of the, I guess, what you'd say crudely, the classic number 9, rather than a more modern one. And
you're totally right. And with your Gyökeres, you get the finished article, don't you? But it's gonna cost you an absolute boatload of cash. It's interesting what you say about Maresca and Man City, because there's a real parallel there with McKenna. These kind of studied guys who've been in and around it, obviously have had Delap on their radars for 10, 12 years, knowing about him. And particularly at Ipswich last year, it was very noticeable when Ipswich played Hull. McKenna, after the game, I've never heard him name check a player like it. He played a different centre-back just out of nowhere to play against Delap, and mentioned Delap 3 or 4 times. So I think your likes of Maresca and McKenna, who've been around studying, you know, particularly at that academy level with Spurs or with Man City, are very sweet on this guy.
No, 100%. And you know, hopefully it's the start of a good summer for Chelsea. With your Championship knowledge, and also, of course, it relates directly to Ipswich as well. Marc Guiu, that's another interesting part of this deal. It looks like Marc Guiu is going to head in the opposite direction, on loan for a season. And I've got to say, I'm a big fan of Championship loans. I think it's such a great place for youngsters to go to, for positive or negative, because I think it gets you senior football, it gets you intense football. And from a Chelsea perspective, from our academy, like, look at that Conference League final. 2 of the starters, 2 of the key players, Reece James and Trevor Chalobah, both had...
Mate, can I just interrupt quickly? I saw Reece James when he was 18 playing for Wigan, and he was playing fullback. And you look down at your phone, you're like, who's that guy, James? Oh, Chelsea, okay, I get it. And best player on the pitch by a mile. Fast forward to the end of the season, stuck him in central midfield. He's like running the game. That season we had Trevor Chalobah as well. So, but yeah, sorry, continue.
No, I was just going to say, because it's a great example, right? Like, I obviously that whole crop that came through with Frank when he joined as manager after leaving Derby, like Mason Mount, Fikayo Tomori. You know, we've had great experience of the Championship, especially for our academy players, being a good place. I guess just from your perspective, with Guiu, what's the reaction maybe of other Ipswich fans as well, of what they're getting heading into next season back in the Championship?
Well, it's difficult because you get a lot of nonsense spoken, because people hear an exotic name from a massive club and all of a sudden get very excited when, if you're really self-aware and honest like I'm about to be, I'd never heard of the guy until about 3 days ago. So what I'll do is, before you tell me all about him, I'll say I think it's great that Ipswich are in a position now where they can cultivate a relationship with a Champions League club to take loan players. I think you need to understand your place in the food chain, and if selling Liam Delap helps sweeten a relationship between two sporting directors or is an unwritten part of a deal, then I think that's fantastic. But just tell me about the player quickly.
So we got him from Barcelona last summer for, I mean, it's 3 or 4 million. I mean, it was a really cheap deal, and because he sort of excited a little bit at Barcelona, and he comes in and actually had quite an exciting pre-season. Like none of us expected much from him at all, and it's a bit of a shame really, because the Conference League, I think, could have been the competition where he got a lot more minutes, but unfortunately he got injured around February time, and literally he came off the bench right at the end of the Conference League final, and that's the first competitive football he's played in months. But he is, I mean, even more than Delap, he is extremely raw, extremely raw. He is someone though that I think you can see decent attributes about him. He's a willing runner. He's a good presser as well. I think that can be developed under a smart coach. He's also got, it's one of the things I was surprised when seeing him live for the first time. He's got quite a bigger frame than expected. So again, in English football, in Championship football, I could see that being developed as well. He had some good individual performances. Again, I think from a Chelsea point of view, context has to be applied. This was against the likes of Astana and Shamrock Rovers. And I sort of look at Championship level and I sort of think, well, I think some Championship teams could have got through some of those Conference League games, to be honest. But at the same time, I think he is a player that I see someone with, very, very raw, but I think under the right circumstance and with enough, trust and kind of a good coach, I could see the tools are there, whether it be, ball striking, whether it be aerially becoming more of a dominant threat because of the natural frame he has, pressing from the front, obviously very important in the modern game. I could see those things being developed. What I would say is, I watched him the majority of last season whenever he came off the bench, and I just thought this guy desperately needs a loan somewhere. And again, context, right? Like what I'm expecting from a Chelsea centre forward is very different to what, an Ipswich fan is maybe expecting. But even, I'd assume Ipswich will want to try and get back to the Premier League next year. So you're going to need someone who's going to be impactful. So that's what I would say. It's very difficult, right? Because as much as I can sit here and tell you my thoughts on a Chelsea player, like I was so high on Billy Gilmour, and I remember being on, I know probably not great to bring up speaking to an Ipswich fan, but I was speaking to the guys at Talk Norwich when they had him on loan, and I loved Billy Gilmour, and I thought this is going to be an incredible loan for him, but it wasn't Championship, it was Premier League, and of course it didn't really work out. So you can never say with literally any transfer it's going to be a great thing. But I would say, I think for this point in his career, there's no point in him sticking around at Chelsea for another year with Delap arriving, with other players arriving. And I just wonder in a year's time, may not be good enough to return to Chelsea, but I think he could find a good home at Ipswich, because I think he does need it. It feels like he was a little bit lost being at Chelsea.
Yeah, great insight. I mean, the first thing I'd say that's not even about... Sorry, do me the pronunciation again. Guiu, yeah?
Marc Guiu, yeah. We were joking before we started recording that, yeah, there was a few different pronunciations. Over the course of the season, Guiu is, the one that I've heard the most.
I mean, the first thing is, how do they take to 46 games, 3-game weeks, which you won't get at Chelsea, going to Pompey on Wednesday night in the wind, and then Preston the following Tuesday away? Some people... You see really talented players come down. I don't want to call out. Take someone like Imran Loser at Watford, where you think that guy can really play, and he's still at Watford and hasn't torn. And then take someone like Emi Buendia, who Jack up at Talk Norwich City would love. He properly rolled his sleeves up and just completely bossed the league. Look, of course you want a really, really good loan player. I would love to see option to buy at end of season in the deal, because what you don't want is for you to... I mean, look, if he scores you 15 goals and you get promoted, then happy days. No one's been taken advantage of in that deal, but you want the player at the end of it or an option to get the player, not an obligation, hopefully an option. But you never know. I always say never fall in love with a lone player, don't you? So I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the main attacking threat being a lone player. But then Villa fans weren't complaining when Tammy Abraham was banging in 25 goals and they were winning the playoffs, were they? So, context is key here. And I'm, very excited. Very excited to see it. It's funny how you say it. Not a dig, but 3 or 4 million from Barcelona is a small deal. Any team without parachute payments in the Championship, that'll be the biggest striker deal that will be done in the summer. So it's these chasms and these things which, Ipswich are fortunately the right side of, having got promoted now. More power to him, and a 19-year-old on loan with Barcelona and Chelsea on their rap sheet could be good. Who was it who had all those? Do you remember Poveda? He it was like Barcelona, Arsenal, Man City, and then you think this guy must be, and then you go, there's a reason he's passed through all these clubs, and it never quite worked out. But yeah, really excited to see him.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic example of you look at Harry Kane's earliest years in the Championship, and literally no one would have watched that guy and thought he's going to become one of England's, most successful kind of centre forwards in terms of goal scoring, and is one day going to be, helping Bayern Munich lift the Bundesliga. Like no one would have predicted that watching him. And it's kind of the awkward thing. I'm sure it's the same for you with Ipswich and covering the Championship. It's like development of footballers isn't linear. Like it's not, you can't, some people are kind of just destined to be great from an early age. And, you look at Cole Palmer, right? Like he's come in and absolutely blitzed it at Chelsea.
What a player.
But even then, I know you were talking about signing Delap last summer and obviously the Man City connection. Like when we signed him, no one would have, even people who liked him and believed there was potential there. Literally no one. Well, but again, the chasm, right? Like for me, what we've got from Cole Palmer to spend 40 million on him, again, I know I'm probably, speaking to a lot of Championship fans who will be rolling their eyes and can't believe that I'm sort of saying that 40 million's a low fee. But, in the context of what Chelsea have spent and failed with other players a lot more, the payback was there within, to me, like a year, like in terms of what he's developed into and so quickly. So, yeah, Guiu, I think, as kind of a raw player, I just hope he takes hold of the opportunity. And given that the fee from a Chelsea perspective was so low to sign him, it was kind of like one of those things where I looked at it and felt cynically, and it's part of what I don't like about Chelsea's transfer strategy. Cynically, I could see it as kind of a flip for profit type player. And they knew in the current market he could go to anywhere, right? But especially in this scenario, goes to Ipswich, has a really good season, and either Ipswich sign him for more than Chelsea originally paid for him, or someone else comes in, maybe a Premier League team comes in and pays over 10 million for him. And that's cynically how they'll look at it. So that's kind of the way it rolls.
Don't hate the player, hate the game. Just really quickly on Kane, the funniest thing is when you see that Troy Deeney goal and they miss a penalty beforehand, and Harry Kane is literally like the best penalty taker you'll ever see in the future. Is literally sat on the bench for Leicester. And you're totally right about the Championship. I love the Championship, but unfortunately it is full of players who have either finished at the top level and are coming down, who are good enough to play at the top level and haven't quite got there yet, or players who are never going to be good enough to play at Premier League level. That's the deal with the second tier. And you're totally right. If he comes down and he's too good for it, he'll tear it up and he'll be back at the top level soon enough.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you so much, mate, for taking the time to have this convo. I know we're putting this on both our podcasts, both our channels. So thank you for that. And just quickly, it feels weird because, as I say, people watching on your show will know this. But just for my audience, just a chance for you to shout out where people can find your work. Because, as I say, it's not just Ipswich related. You do a lot of great work in the Championship. And I know from a Chelsea point of view, not just our loan players, but there's a lot of interest emotionally with Frank at Coventry. So I know you'll be covering that as well.
I will, absolutely, yes. So just type in the Benjamin Bloom football channel, or just type in Benjamin Bloom, and my annoying face will pop up in your YouTube search.
I've been watching a lot of your kind of. I have to, take the gauntlet myself soon and reacting to my preseason predictions.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's luckily from a solely Chelsea perspective, it actually isn't that bad.
Once I get into Forest.
I did. I actually didn't do. I don't do every every position in the table.
Right.
I sort of did, if I remember rightly, I think I did like the top 7. Forest, of course, were not in there. I think the worst one from memory, I had Everton going down.
But this is where I'll go off on a big rant about the Chasm. Everton probably 10 years ago would have gone down, given how bad they've been. But that's where we are with the chasm between the EFL and the Premier League. But please, there you go. There's a plug. Go and see me rant about that yesterday as it pertains to Leeds, Burnley, and Sunderland, who've just been promoted.
100%. But thank you so much as well for you guys watching on my channel as well. We'll be back again. We'll be doing so much postseason content about Chelsea on the show, and as well, I'm sure as this discussion has proved, lots about potential incomings at Stamford Bridge. So thank you for watching. Follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.